Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 4 of the Playoff Push podcast here on whatever platform you're listening on. And today I have a very special guest, owner of Cade's Fantasy Sports, and my co broadcaster at my high school of Holy Ghost Prep in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, Cayden Stewart. How are we doing tonight?
I'm feeling fantabulous, Jack Dobbins. How about you?
Very good word there to lead off. I'm doing well. Trying to, see who I can get on this podcast. And right now we got the man himself, Cayden Stewart.
I appreciate that. It's a busy time at Kate Starter's Fantasy Sports. I'm glad to get the exposure here. I know your podcast has been really successful. I listened to the first few episodes, so I'm extremely impressed by it, and I'm glad to be on.
Love it. Love it. So, where do you want to start? You want to start with the roster cuts that came up today? Today was the 53-man roster deadline in the NFL at 4 p.m. How about that?
Sounds like a good place to start. Obviously, or I should say, almost 1,000 different players being cut today. So, unfortunately, a lot of dreams being crushed, but a lot of veteran players have already gotten opportunity, also changing spots. So, important to cover that. And obviously, like you said, a lot of big names. So if we want to start with the first one, I'm thinking Desmond Ritter.
Totally. I mean, a huge trade that brought him over to Arizona just a while ago from the Falcons that sent Rondale Moore over there. He's on IR. But Ritter was another big piece back that came to Arizona, and now he's gone. And they're looking totally at Kyler Murray for the year.
Yeah, and that's a move I definitely like. Kyler Murray is being slept on this year heavily. I like him as a top 10 fantasy quarterback this year. He has the rushing upside. And with two-time Heisman winner or two-time Heisman finalist, pardon me, and Marvin Harrison Jr. now joining the squad, there's going to be a lot of upside there for a guy like Kyler Murray. But I'm looking at Ritter and just looking at the rest of that 2022 QB draft class. It's almost unfortunate. Like in addition to Ritter, you've had news that Bailey Zappi got cut today as well from the Patriots. And while he wasn't the biggest name, he had made a name for himself about 3 years ago in the wake of Mac Jones' injury and just having that random insanity run for like 3 or 4 weeks. So always important to mention him when possible. And then a guy like Malik Willis being traded to the Packers for a seventh round pick just to back up Jordan Love. It's just been a QB carousel. And even the other guys like Kenny Pickett's a backup on my Eagles now. You have Matt Corral, who was just cut. It's just not a great look for that QB draft class. And I have a feeling it might be a repeat of 2022 in this year's class.
Yeah, that 22 class, aside from Brock Purdy, who we all know is leading the Niners to a Super Bowl, but Skylar Thompson's the only other guy that's on the team that he was drafted to. And they were both seventh rounders, I believe. Nobody else is on the team they started on. So this has truly been a carousel in every single way you could put it.
I believe Thompson was undrafted, but even then, like still, like it's close enough. And Thompson's the only other quarterback in that draft class to start a playoff game. Like that is unbelievable. Because when Tua got hurt 2 years ago, Thompson
Right.
started the
Yeah, I think you're
Dolphins.
right on that.
Like that is an insane trivia
Wow.
question. Like, that's gonna be bar trivia when we get to that age in about 10 years. Who is the only other QB from the 2022 draft class?
That's insane. I didn't even think about that. Wow. Holy cow. Look at that. Skylar Thompson and Brock Purdy, dynamic duo. How about we
Yeah,
get
that
some halfbacks?
all right. I like that.
Got a lot of halfbacks that got cut today. But my most notable one, Frank Gore Jr. getting cut from Buffalo.
Yeah, he's definitely gonna get picked up somewhere though. There's a lot of teams looking for good running back depth, and that's always important. I've noticed a lot of teams this week, or I should say this morning, narrow their running back depth chart down to just three guys. And there's no way that's sustainable. Running backs get injured at an extremely high rate, and it's almost unfortunate to see. And it really is unfortunate to see all throughout the year. So a guy like Frank Gore Jr., who obviously has the experience being under his dad, Frank Gore, probable Hall of Famer running back, and he's had the explosive ability himself. I think gets picked up by a team in the coming days or weeks before the season starts.
It's interesting because he was, I believe, the highest rated halfback in the preseason from, I think, PFF, but it could be something else. But he was performing at a very high caliber and still got cut. So he's going to be a big weapon. Like I would take Frank Gore as my halfback over, say, Ty Chandler on Minnesota. Like he would be my halfback two over Ty Chandler.
That's an interesting take there. I've never been a big Ty Chandler guy. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't focused a lot on Frank Gore Jr. I mean, I know the name, I know I've seen a lot of skill on that side. He was gonna be behind James Cook in Buffalo anyway, so he probably wouldn't have gotten a great opportunity there. So now for a team like maybe even Green Bay with AJ Dillon going on IR for the
Yeah,
year,
that could be a big one.
or yeah, or San Fran even because Elijah Mitchell's on IR for the year now as well. And they have Jordan Mason, who I'll get to later on when we start getting to the fantasy aspect of these cuts. But Jordan Mason only had 250 yards last year, so it's not like he's going to be a massive down back, especially in the wake of a McCaffrey injury where San Fran's going to need to add a second guy. And Frank Gore Jr., going back to where Frank Gore Sr. played in San Fran, like that's going to be an interesting storyline to watch.
Exactly. There's a lot of teams that could use a backup halfback in this scenario. And what about a playoff contender like the Niners? I mean, that would be a great spot to go to.
Oh yeah, definitely, especially for a young guy like that, and under
But
a with a seasoned veteran like McCaffrey.
totally. And, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to having him on my Giants either, but I don't know if we need another halfback.
You guys need a lot. I'm not gonna lie.
Wow. Wow. That's brutal.
As an Eagles fan, I get the shot in.
That's brutal. We got a lot of other halfbacks that got cut though today. We got Samaje P. Ryan from the Bengals, Boston Scott from the Rams. I mean, we're seeing like a lot of these veterans also drop, not just the UDFAs and the late picks of the world.
Oh yeah, definitely. I got to shout out Boston Scott too. My dad was able to meet him a few weeks ago. He's an amazing guy, so I just got to shout out him. Giant killer as well. Always in my
Shut
thoughts
up.
and prayers.
Shut
Boston
up.
Scott.
You're so mean.
It's forever my 2020 dog, Boston Scott.
You're so mean. You're so mean. But the highlight of Boston Scott's career is those Giant games. So could we see him potentially go to a Dallas?
I think if I'm not mistaken, it's only just came on before we actually started recording, signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I
again, a
didn't
little
see
closer
that.
to home here in Philly, especially for a
Update.
team like
I
LA.
missed that.
Yeah, I follow this way too closely. Don't worry about it. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be the only person in the entire world besides his mother that knows it.
That's an interesting move though, because he'll be their third halfback behind Najee and Warren, right?
Yeah, and that's gonna be a deadly tandem there. If Scott is the same way as he usually is a red zone back, because he's powerful. Like, he's not the most explosive guy, but he can get you 3, 4 yards when needed.
Oh, totally. Especially in the red zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can push. He can definitely push. That's an interesting signing, though. I never would have guessed he would go to Pittsburgh over, another team where he could be a two.
Hmm.
And then there's receivers.
Oh yeah, a lot
Holy
of.
cow, where do we even start?
It seems like
I have
all
an
my feed
idea.
was blowing up. You got you and everyone else's Snapchats and Instagrams about like, yo, this random guy got cut. And for the most part, I get back, who is that? But from you, it's like pretty much back and forth, like, oh wow.
Yeah, how about we start with the Houston Texans cutting two guys, one of which you're a big fan of, and one of which totally changes the depth chart. Noah Brown and Ben Skoranek both getting cut.
Yeah. Ben Skoranek, forever my most random correct draft pick prediction. Still have no idea how I got the 226th pick in the 2021 draft correctly.
That's still insane how you managed to nail his pick exactly.
I'm still forever mind boggled by that. But yeah, Ben Skoranek, I'll never forget you. Hopefully you sign with the Eagles and like a practice squad deal, so I have an excuse to keep mentioning you. But for Noah Brown, obviously definitely the more notable guy. Had 560 something receiving yards last year. Like that is a notable cut, especially for a team like the Texans that we were crowning this year as probably the best wide receiver core. And obviously cutting Noah Brown doesn't really change that, although the Eagles adding Dotson might. But just that whole team is so unbelievably loaded with receiver talent and both wide receiver and tight end that cutting a 500-yard receiver, it almost makes no difference.
And the fact that they're still trying to get some receivers out, they're shopping Mechie, I've heard. That Texans receiver core is just so loaded, they can really do whatever they want.
And Messi's another guy that I saw coming out of college that I was really high on. I for always he's one of those guys like a Todd Gurley where you get the freak injury or in his case freak leukemia where it just sidelined him for the entire first year of his career and it just was not like at all what anyone expected. So he kind of like just was kind of disadvantaged by that for his entire first season. So the last 2 years, he started to pick it up a little bit. I was way too high on him last year with my fantasy predictions. I will admit that. Hopefully, people didn't draft him as a wide receiver three like I had told them to. But this year, he's got potential now with Noah Brown gone.
I mean, this Texans receiver core is just so loaded. You have five viable receivers that you can hit at any moment. You got Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs at the top, and then Mechie even is a good 3-4 guy.
But yeah, I think it'd be a 3-4 guy on a lot of different teams that are probably short arm receivers. Like before the Eagles got Dotson, I was honestly big on the Eagles trying to get Mechie. Because even though we have Anais Smith and Johnny Wilson, the two guys we drafted this year, with Wilson being an absolute unit and Anais Smith having potential to be the next Debo Smith or Debo Samuel. My bad. That's a massive spell. But Debo, Anais Smith and Johnny Wilson, then adding John Mechie to that, like, that would be, and with Hurts throwing the ball, there's no way anyone can stop that.
I mean, Mechie's listed at wide receiver 5 on the depth chart behind Diggs, Collins, Dell, and Woods. So that's a totally ridiculous core. Never mind their halfbacks. Mixon, Pierce, Cam Akers, and then somehow above Akers, you got Dare Obungale, who I've never heard of in my life, but he is the third string halfback over Akers, apparently.
Known kicker Darren Ngabale.
And then you got, legend Case Keenum as their third string quarterback on the IR. You got Dalton Schultz and Brevin Jordan at tight end. This Texans team's loaded, man.
Yeah, they're definitely one of my top candidates in the AFC. I'm not going to pick against the Chiefs because at this point, who possibly can with their dominance the last few years? But if anyone's going to crown or overtake the Chiefs and get that AFC crown, my first pick's the Texans.
Giants also had some big cuts, and I'm like the expert of talking about this. But we cut Lawrence Cager, we cut Isaiah Hodgins, and we cut Allen Robinson. Three big offensive weapons, all getting the boot and getting sent right out of East Rutherford. How do you feel about any of those moves?
Well, Hodgins just having that memory of watching the 2022 wild card game before the Eagles wind up going 38-7 in
Shut
the
up.
divisional round.
That Vikings game was the greatest game of my life. Actually, no, I lied. Second, my first. I've only been to one Giants game in MetLife. I know, crazy, and it was against the Colts when Kayvon did Snow Angels on Foles' dead body. So that's probably my favorite game ever.
Yeah, I still remember seeing your reaction to that. Like that's
The
probably my favorite
funniest
Giants game
thing
ever. Was
ever.
with that.
That was so funny.
Yeah, but after that, I love Hodgins. Just I shouldn't say I love Hodgins, but he's a good target for a lot of different teams. He's around that Noah Brown tier, where a team that is weak on wide receivers, like a Eagles before Dotson, or even a Giants, but the cut is going to be hard. But I can see Noah Brown possibly making a comeback there to New York as a new fresh start. I've honestly never had a problem with Hodgins. I was kind of surprised by that cut, easily one of the more shocking cuts of the day. So there's definitely finding another home in the next few weeks.
Another interesting one is Lawrence Cager, whom, I met at the third practice I went to outside of MetLife. But he was getting tight end 1 reps at the beginning of training camp, then went down with an injury, and now he's not on the team. Just shows how fast injuries can, change the way that your season's trajectory looks.
Yeah, Cage was a disappointing one. I know you went to training camp and you had pointed him out a few times to me. So he was the guy that was like on the back of my head on the radar there, especially with Darren Waller now pursuing his rap career. But Cager, that's another guy that I was kind of shocked to see on the Giants cut list, especially like not taking a shot here, but legitimately kind of a lack of still solid wide receiver and tight end options there. You guys have neighbors I also want to touch on later in the fantasy portion because I see people drafting him all over the place. But I think you guys have a lot of potential there. It just comes down to who's going to step up now in that tight end role, which I guess would be Daniel Bellinger.
I guess so. Yeah, we're looking at Bellinger. We're also looking at Chris Manhertz, who made the roster as tight end 3.
Now that's a name I haven't heard in a while.
I mean, he wasn't bad in training camp. Like I was seeing him, he was blocking well, which is what I noticed. I mean, his hands or whatever, but he was throwing some nice blocks. That was the big thing that I picked up on in my few trips to East Rutherford this summer.
Yeah, I've heard good things from Manhurts. I more know him as the uh, Bengals backup guy, I believe. And I think he may have had
I
similar
think
to
so,
Jets,
yeah.
but I think Bengals is top
Are,
team, and
wait,
he has the record.
are you thinking of Uzoma?
You know, I might, which is another surprising Eagles cut.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on that too, but we can touch on it now.
Yeah, use him, and then we're going back to your Giants real quick. Jack Stoll. So
Yeah.
I think
He
the Giants might be going all in on Daniel Bellinger here.
We had a lot of tight ends coming into training camp.
Yeah.
So it was just a matter of who was going to make it and who wasn't. And I thought it was going to be KJ or Bellinger, man hurts. That's what I thought. Oh, and Theo. No, Theo. Oh my God, I'm stupid. No, Theo's tight end one. Theo.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I don't know how I
Okay.
forgot my boy. That's a crime.
And as you can see, after Waller left, I kind of just distanced myself from every single New York Giants tight end. But yeah, that room had a lot of potential. I think Jack Stoll had a whole 2 yards for the Eagles. So he had a name for himself in my heart when he came in and signed with them. I was felt kind of betrayed last year, but a lot of potential there in that Giants tight end room if Bellinger can go off and pretty much do what he did a few years ago.
Yeah, hopefully Daniel Jones can do absolutely anything. But how about some former Giants that also got cut? Kadarius Toney, Paris Campbell, and Sterling Shepard.
Yeah, Tony, I'd say it was almost like a show had come to an end, but it wasn't really that good of a show. It was like, oh, what now? It was kind of like you knew it was going to happen, but it was just fun to watch before it did. And now it's just like, all right, who's going to step up? And initially, at the time, for the whole 15 minutes before the next guy got cut, I thought it'd be Justin Ross, former LSU standout.
Oh,
But
yeah.
now with Ross gone, that wide receiver room is going to look a little bit different.
And somehow Sky Moore made the team. We won't question that, I guess.
I mean, knowing that team, I'm pretty sure that Andy Reid is just hiding a wide receiver like in his waistband somewhere. And in week 6, he's gonna like pop out and randomly put up 100 yards, and not a single person is gonna have any documentation that dude existed.
Yeah, and
It's just the Chiefs' offense is at this point.
the Chiefs offense is just like they can be like, "Oh yeah, this guy's on the team by the way," and then he'll go drop the most astonishing game you've ever seen.
Shout out Justin Watson.
Dude, no, Watson was balling last year. Watson was putting up nice numbers.
Yeah, so except when I actually needed him to in fantasy, but so I'm gonna still be a little salty about that. But yeah, Watson's definitely a name to watch, and he could be the guy that steps up here in the absence of Justin Ross and
Yeah.
now Sony, as we said before.
They also got Hollywood too, I think.
Yeah, and that's gonna be a storyline to watch the first couple of weeks because Hollywood, even though he's gonna be in for most of the year, is already doubtful for week 1, and from what I'm hearing, could miss the next 2 weeks after that, if not more, if the injury doesn't
Wow.
progress well. So those first 3 weeks are gonna be interesting in Kansas City, especially considering that Patrick Mahomes has his legally obligated first 3 weeks of looking bad before he goes on his 15-week MVP run.
Totally. All right, let's switch over to fantasy gears. But just before we do that, I'm going to read off a few more players who did get cut, who are notable to bring up in some way or another. Donovan Peoples-Jones was cut from the Lions. CJ Henderson was cut from the Texans. He was the ninth overall pick in the 2020 draft. Cayden's favorite football player of all times, Louis Rees Emmett, was cut from the Chiefs.
Oh yeah. My other favorite was also Clive. I'm gonna see if you get to that first. I'll tell you later.
Louis Sign, the 2022 first round pick from the Vikings, was cut. Samson Nakua, brother of Puka Nakua, who had an 106-yard return this preseason, was cut, as well as Equanimous St. Brown, also from the Saints. And we also had Caleb Farley, the 2021 first round pick of the Titans, getting the boot. And yet, Mercedes Lewis, the 40-year-old tight end who made his debut the year I was born, made the Bears roster.
Mercedes Lewis is another one of those guys where you see him every now and then. It's like, oh, he's still alive. Cool. And then you see him about that
Is
time.
that a threat?
No, no, no. I like Mercedes Lewis. I like him as a Packer. He was fun to watch those few days on Sunday Night Football where I could stay up past halftime.
Totally. All right, so
But
there's a few guys that got cut that are pretty notable. And now we switch to fantasy, which is where the actual good players go.
yeah, this is obviously my strong point. I've spent way too much time writing articles on Cade starters. I'm going to spend way too much more time come the football season every Saturday posting breakdowns for each and every game coming up this year. We'll have our 5 highlight games for everyone. And then if I can figure out my website, I might drop some additional premium subscriber bonuses. So we'll see how that turns out.
Sweet. So, how about you start off with your big fantasy pick, your first round pick, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions?
So obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown is not the best overall player in the draft. That title will probably belong to Christian McCaffrey for the next few years, as long as he can keep it healthy. But even an unhealthy McCaffrey missing a week or two is just so dominant at his position that I can't pick against him. However, if I'm at the seventh pick in my fantasy league, I'll use that as an example. McCaffrey is not falling to seven if he even falls to two. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is a great guy for a value pick there. Bonafide top five wide receiver. I've been watching him out of USC after he got drafted a few years ago. He has slowly progressed up the leaderboard and has continued to climb. This dude is an absolute dog, and he's guaranteed to get his target share in Detroit from Jared Goff. Goff's already shown how much he likes Amon-Ra St. Brown, and now with the fallback option of Sam Laporta, there's not going to be three guys hounding Amon-Ra all the time. And even with that, St. Brown was still able to put up double-digit totals in touchdowns and 1,000-yard receiving seasons. So I can't see anywhere where picking Amon-Ra St. Brown as the top three picks would be a bad decision.
Amon-Ra is also an absolute psychopath and also knows that you exist. So that's fun.
Yeah, that was one of the highlights of my summer so far is just seeing you text, "Hey, Amon-Ra St. Brown knows you exist." Like, let's go, bro.
Yeah, you're welcome. But
Thank you
for
very much for
everyone
that.
who doesn't know about this, before every game, Amon Ra reads a list of every receiver taken before him, as well as his goals for the season. His goals last year were 1,500 yards and 10 touchdowns. You want to take a wild guess what his stats were at the end of last season?
But you're right to think I don't have everything about him memorized by now.
He had 1,515 yards and 10 touchdowns. He
I'm
was
telling you, man,
15 yards over his goal and had the exact amount of touchdowns he wanted.
he is the prophet. He is
The
just the
dude
prophet.
is a psycho. Like that
Yeah,
is insane. Reading the goals, almost nailing them, and reading the name of every single receiver drafted before you, which was at least like 10 of them, probably closer to 15. It's just insane. The dude's crazy, but he's a crazy good ball player.
yeah. I want Amon-Ra in every league I can possibly get him. PPR, non-PPR, even half. Like, there's nothing that this dude can't do, and I don't see any like low floor. I think he is the highest floor of any player in fantasy football this year.
The most tragic thing about it is I did not get a single draft pick where I felt confident taking him, which is crazy. I had the two and I took CD, and then I had the 11 and the 10. And it's like, okay, well, it's either I take him at two or I don't get him. And that's just how it was.
Yeah, the second passing on him at a second pick, I can understand that. CeeDee Lamb's going to go crazy this year, especially with the new contract. There's no real
Dude,
debate
that was
the
the
whole lot.
happiest I've ever been for someone on Dallas getting something positive. I was coming down from third floor of you know what building, and I just screamed, "Yes!"
Yeah, I can believe that. And knowing your volume level from our experiences at Holy Ghost Prep Television, I feel like I might be able to hear that from my house a couple miles away.
Oh, it's I'm not that loud when I whisper. But yeah, Amon Ra, great first round pick there. You heard it from the man himself, Cade starters right there. But a guy who I'm highlighting in the, late first to early second, depending on how many people are in your league, Saquon Barkley. I mean,
I
as
mean,
a Giants fan, going from the Giants O line putting up good numbers to going to the Eagles O line, this man's gonna put up ridiculous numbers if he can stay healthy, whether I like it or not.
yeah, and that's what I keep seeing people say is just asking like what he did behind the Giants offensive line now that Jason Kelsey's gone. So I understand that the Eagles O line is not going to be as the prolific number one overall in the league that they have been in years past. But comparing this Eagles offensive line to the Giants O line that they had in the past is just frankly dumb. It's so much better, and the offensive weapons around him are so much better that Saquon is just this is gonna be the best year of his career, honestly. And he's got the
I
chip on his shoulder now with New York. This is gonna be a season to watch.
I mean, the Eagles O line better be just as good. I'm seeing Eagles fans talk about Jurgens like he's Jesus. So we're gonna have to hope that he plays like that, or else everyone in Philly is a liar.
Hopefully, I don't get grouped in too far into that. I like Jurgens, and that's something that people also seem to forget as he was drafted 2 years ago, I believe. Jason Kelsey scouted Cam Jurgens. Cam Jurgens would not be on this football team if Jason Kelsey, one of the greatest centers of all time, did not pick him and handpick him in the combine.
Just for the record, I will say this. I will not say who it was. I was having a conversation with someone regarding Cam Jurgens, and he said Jurgens plays like Mike Webster. And I just stared at him. My jaw was on the floor. Like that's such a crazy statement. And the fact he legitimately believed it is insane.
Yeah, that is a little bit of an outlandish statement, but I am super excited for this season. I really look forward to seeing what Cam Jurgens can do.
Yeah, so a big Saquon poised for a big year behind this Eagles O line in this Eagles offense that went to the Super Bowl just a couple years ago.
Hmm.
Any other guys you want to highlight for this fantasy season?
Honestly, in the first round, not so much. However, I do know what the people want, and that's going to be sleepers. So if you want to go diving into sleepers real quick, I have a
Can't say Reese Zammit
laundry list
anymore
of
because he's
them.
not on the team.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna Luis Reed was the guy that you're in your 18th round, you're at your draft party, your uncles are all blackout drunk, your cousins are starting to get there, and you want to throw someone up on the board that's like, who the heck is that guy? And then that's your 18th round pick and like 360th overall or something. And that's what I thought Zamet could be. And then he got cut. And so, yeah, now I'm kind of sad about that. But he's also never played a professional football game in his life or football game at any level, coming from Wales as a rugby player. But that dude is a unit and a fast one, a 4.3 40 in the combine. If he gets picked up, I'm still going to keep my eye out on him. I would have liked to see him in Kansas City, as that's the team that would be like the Talladega Super Speedway for a NASCAR reference there of football teams where anything can happen and any singular player can be used to the fullest. So I don't think you have this potential somewhere else, but keep an eye out on that. Like keep in the back of your mind in years future.
But even with Reese Zammit going, there is still another heavy sleeper in that KC offense. Wide receiver, record breaker. How about him, Mr. Xavier Worthy?
This is a dude I've had my eye on since the combine, mainly because Buffalo traded away the pick that they could have spent on him to give him to Kansas City, which automatically means he's a future first ballot Hall of Famer. But this dude set the record for fastest 40-yard dash time. And while it doesn't mean everything, the fact that he has just as good hands as legs is crazy. You usually see guys like John Ross, who actually got cut today from the Eagles, whose record was broken by Xavier Worthy, not wind up having the same route running and just overall big playability that some other wide receivers have. Worthy has it all. His only issue that I've seen, and this is a massive disclaimer, is his problems off the line. We saw him get bullied that one snap
In
that went viral
press
in training
coverage
camp.
is going to be his big weakness.
Yeah, and that's what I am worried about with him. But if he's not in press, and even I should say this, let me go back real quick. Devontae Smith had the same issue coming out of college, and he won the Heisman. He's a little undersized. I think he's even smaller than Worthy, and definitely not as fast. And he still is now a top 20 wide receiver. And while you agree or disagree with that, you still can't argue him out to the top 25. Like he's a very solid guy. Again, future former Heisman winner. I mean, I think Worthy can be around the same tier as Devontae Smith, if not better this year in a Kansas City offense, where he'll be the bona fide number one option to start the year.
I can explain his status in 5 words: blazing speed, Mahomes' arm, unfair.
Yeah, that's about it. He's going to be the Tyreek Hill this year. Even though Tyreek Hill is still Tyreek Hill, like this dude is going to have the potential that Tyreek Hill had when he was in Kansas City.
Yeah, absolutely huge ceiling. And you can probably get him. What round are we looking at him? Like a 9 or a 10 spot?
Last I looked, his average draft position for wide receivers is 36, which puts
Yeah,
him as
like,
the last wide receiver three, which is absolutely incredible. You can probably get him seventh round if you're lucky.
yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous.
It, I love Worthy. I love a lot of these rookie wide receivers, and it's weird that I usually am not high on rookies in wide receiver, running back, any position. But just to jump you real quick, my next rookie guy, I think you might know where I'm going with this. Former Oregon stud, now at Denver. And I heard a concerning report yesterday that I do want to clarify, considering I have him ranked top 50 on my website right now. But Troy Franklin, it is this dude's time to shine in Casey's division rival there in Denver. The Broncos cut multiple guys today, including wide receivers Tim Patrick and little Jordan Humphrey, whom the report actually it said might be ranked above Troy Franklin on the depth chart. So now that those two guys are gone, Franklin has now proven that he's going to be a valuable option for Bo Nix, who last year led Franklin to over 1,300, close to 1,400 yards receiving and double-digit touchdown totals. He was a demon at Oregon and was ranked higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. in some categories and was ranked higher than Malik Neighbors in a lot of categories as well. So this guy was among those top stars and still fell a little bit farther in the NFL draft than I thought he would. And you can get this guy as wide receiver 65 in fantasy. And it is probably 10th, 11th round. The amount of value that that has is unbelievable. He has incredible upside. And for a flyer pick like that, where your other best option would be like an Adam Thielen, a wide receiver two on a team like Carolina, the it's unprecedented how unbelievably high up on my list Joey Franklin is right now.
I expected you to go Franklin. I just didn't expect you to go him immediately. I thought you'd go Lad McConkey before you go Franklin, but we'll touch on him in a minute. But I mean, yeah, Bo Nix coming in the preseason, balling out for Denver, looking like, Peyton Manning Jr. and just performing well. And Franklin, with that connection from college, this could be a deadly weapon as long as Franklin puts himself out there in this offense and tries to take some snaps from Cortland.
Yeah, I think he probably could contest Cortland Sutton for some snaps. I think Sutton is still gonna be the bona fide number one. I love saying bona fide. I say it too much, but it's just the term I like to use in this case. But Troy Franklin is just gonna be that guy, number two. But I will say, going back to the report, I heard that he might almost have a red shirt style year this year for Denver, where he doesn't get used too much, even with Bo Nix at the helm. So keep an eye on that. But again, for an 11th or 12th round pick, like I said, you can get him at, it's worth the flyer. Like
It's
worst case, he finishes a wide receiver five in fantasy, even if he has a quote unquote red shirt year. I mean, it's not like he's not going to be used at all. You don't see wide receivers just sit on the sidelines when they make the cut like this.
it's still super funny why he fell in the draft because GMs thought that he didn't care about football enough. And so he just dropped and dropped and dropped until Denver was able to pick him up and pair him up with his quarterback.
Yeah, then I haven't seen a ton. Like that hasn't stood out to me a lot. I haven't really seen a lot of reports saying that he didn't like football
It, it
anymore.
was it was like pre-draft stuff. That's why he fell.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I think that's probably might have worked itself out there in Denver. I still like him this year. I think he's going to like football a lot, and I'm going to love football watching him score touchdowns for my fantasy team.
You high on Lad McConkey, or is that just me?
I'm not super high on him. I'm high on Justin Herbert in terms of the actual player. Fantasy wise, this year he's going to have a massive fall off considering I'm pretty sure the entire Los Angeles Chargers offense is now elsewhere.
But that's where Lad McConkey comes in.
Yeah, that is where Lad McConkey comes in. My top lad in this draft. I think he's going to have his workload cut out for him to start the year. I think he's going to have a nice, decently high floor. I don't see him falling outside or far outside the top 40 wide receivers this year. So I think he's going to be a solid wide receiver three option in fantasy. It just comes down to how much does Josh Palmer take away from him. But now with them cutting Donald Parham, who I was trying to get back to earlier when we were talking about the cuts, Donald Parham, my other Madden legend, top tier favorite player, there's going to be the target share available there for Lad McConkey and Josh Palmer.
You remember when I sent you that TikTok, like I think it was probably a year and a half ago, where it's like the Parham Madden card like being painted on every wall of a house.
That is the first video on my camera roll. I
Is
still have
is it
that.
actually?
Yeah, I got a new phone since then, so it's my number one
It's the
video.
funniest video ever. But
Hmm.
the way I see McConkey, I see him, he could be like a Cooper Cup light to me. I see him having like a very similar role. And of course, he's not going to put up triple crown type numbers, but I think he could be a really good slot guy that just gets catches, gets yards, and it could be a big weapon for Herbert in that absolute disaster of a offense.
Yeah, I certainly like McConkey a lot. And I will say, I think we're running a little low on time. So I'm going to go through the next few sleepers pretty
Totally.
bang, bang, just to make sure we get it done. Staying with the Chargers, and we're going to a different position, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. I've always
My
been told,
brother.
yeah, J Dobbins. I was just gonna leave it at that, J Dobbins.
I took
But
him exclusively for that reason.
all right, that's a very valid reason. But I will say, I've always been told in fantasy, follow the money. The money leads to Gus Edwards as to who will be the running back one in that offense. But regardless, the Harbaugh brothers, two coaching brothers, I mean, you have John Harbaugh for Baltimore, where Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins both came from this year, both went into free agency, and both signed with the Los Angeles Chargers on short-term deals. I'm not sure that's a coincidence. I think the Los Angeles Chargers are planning to do a Baltimore Ravens style running offense, and that J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards are going to get their fair share of targets, and both the receiving end and rushing end, they're going to be used often, and I like them a lot coming into this year.
But I think with their talent compared to the talent of the rest of that Chargers offense, the run game is going to be really heavy. When you have two really good backs and Josh Palmer's your wide receiver one, defenses know the ball is going to be ran down their throats.
Yeah, it's got to be the run game there. Even though they might not be winning every single game and probably will finish with a losing record, the run game is still going to be used often. And then
Totally.
just touching on tight ends, two I wanted to highlight right here. One of the first one I've been telling you to draft at every single draft you've had, probably to nauseating factors.
Evan
Evan
Ingram?
Ingram, yeah.
Yes.
He will be a top five tight end this year, especially in PPR. Mark my words. League leader in receptions last year among tight ends with well over 120. And now he loses Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones from his offense. The workload there is going to be unimaginable. The targets are wide open. They are not going to double team Evan Ingram. It's a tight end. In terms of skill, he's not amazing. It's just going to be the insanely high floor there, an insanely high ceiling. I could see him contend for a top three tight end spot this
I
year.
totally agree. Totally agree. Is the
And
other tight end Kincaid?
it is not.
Dang it.
I don't hate Kincaid. However, this guy has potential to
Brutal.
potentially challenge Kincaid as a back end
Brutal.
tight end one on rankings. Hunter Henry.
Okay, bro.
He finished as tight end 13 in fantasy points per game last year with Mac Jones at the helm. He now has Drake May at quarterback, a clear passer upgrade. He had 6 touchdowns last year. That number is going to go up with losses of a ton of different wide receivers. And Ezekiel Elliott from that backfield is now just Ramondre Stevenson. I love Hunter Henry this year. His red zone usage is going to go up. His touchdown totals will go up, and his receptions going to skyrocket. He will be a tight end one in fantasy, and I just got him in the 13th round of my fantasy draft. You do not have to draft a tight end early unless you want a star guy. And even then, you can get another solid running back or wide receiver too that will score more points than, say, a Dalton Kincaid or Trey McBride in fantasy if you wait on Henry in the later rounds.
Alrighty. So those are some nice sleepers there from the man himself, Cayden Stewart. And you should put those into your draft. Take those guys. Apparently, they're going to do very well. I agree with most of them except Hunter Henry. I hate Hunter Henry. But anyway, Cayden, any last words? We probably have a few seconds.
Well, just thank you for having me on the show. I'm very excited for the football season. Be sure to stay tuned and tune into my website every single Saturday during football season for breakdowns on every single game and my best bets every Sunday.
The link will be in the description. Thank you for listening to the Playoff Push podcast and have a great rest of your day on this Wednesday morning.